Moose Fire was ignited on July 17th by sparks from an unattended campfire burning next to the Salmon River. The sparks created a wildfire in Moose Creek Canyon on the south side of the Salmon River. Fanned by high winds and hot temperatures, the fire raced into the crowns of trees in Moose Creek Canyon, causing a giant plume of smoke. Ranchers Jay and Chyenne Smith saw the smoke from their ranch. Their cattle were grazing in the Diamond Moose grazing allotment, high above where the fire started in the Salmon-Challis National Forest.
We see a plume of smoke and we get a phone call, there's a fire on your summer range. From that moment on, the entire summer was a whirlwind.
Initially, forest roads were open. The Smiths drove up into the forest to check on their cattle. They staged a lot of the cattle in Moose Meadow, a large, open, grassy area next to their family cabin, hoping to keep them out of harm's way.
Very first guy I talked to was in structure protection. He was up here doing sprinklers and pumps and thinning trees to protect our private property. And we had a great meeting with him. I told him that my objective for visiting with him was honesty and transparency. Just tell me what to expect. He told us that there was no chance of getting ahead of it and that we were going to be dealing with it all summer long, but he gave us 90 to 95% odds that our private property would be okay. And he was right on every point.
Salmon-Challis National Forest officials called for fire crews, engines, and air attack resources in hopes of stopping the fire with initial attack. First priority was to protect private property and threats to people's lives and safety.
He knew this was going to be a situation that this fire was growing very fast, and we needed to get people on it right away to try to keep this thing small.
Within minutes, the fire had grown from a quarter acre to 300 acres on the first afternoon. Day 2, 12,000 acres. Day 3, 16,500 acres, mainly in the Moose Creek drainage, the Smiths Summer Range area.
So it's running through the crowns and pushing up a whole drainage.
The Smiths were told the fire would likely burn up the Diamond Moose grazing allotment. For most of the summer, they had to wait on the sidelines, hoping their cattle didn't get killed by the blaze.
It's horrible watching just your life go up in smoke. It was frightening and it was stressful, but you feel helpless.
The Moose Creek fire ended up growing to about 130,205 acres in size. It burned for 4.5 months, from mid-July until October 31st. At times, it was the nation's largest wildfire, with 1,500 firefighters engaged. Fire suppression costs, $100 million. Big picture, on day 1 of the fire, there were many factors at play that put livestock and grazing permittees at a lower priority than immediate needs. Initial attack focused on protecting the small roadside town of North Fork, extinguishing the fire on the north side of the Salmon River Canyon, and protecting structures immediately threatened by the wildfire along US 93.
But it had jumped the river and also jumped the road. And so we had now had fire on both sides of the river. Fire moving to the north and also fire moving to the south.
Fire crews and aerial attacks succeeded in stopping the fire on the north side of the Salmon River Canyon. Helicopter water drops on the ridgeline above Moose Creek Canyon, however, did not hold the blaze. 60-mile-per-hour winds fanned the fire. Burning debris from tree crowns were causing spot fires 5 miles away downwind.
I knew it was going to be severe fire behavior, and we wouldn't be able to put any firefighters in there, otherwise we'd kill them.
The Salmon-Challis National Forest has had a history of ferocious fire behavior. Dead and dying trees littered across the forest floor have been accumulating for more than a century. When wildfires combine with high winds and hot temperatures, it's a lethal combination. 5 firefighters have been killed fighting fires there. Emergency shelters have been deployed 163 times as a last-ditch effort to save their lives from wildfires. On day 4 of the Moose Creek fire, a helicopter crashed into the Salmon River, killing 2 pilots on board.
You know, Mother Nature was angry the first 2 days, and it kicked our butt. And it didn't matter what we did or what we threw at it, we still couldn't catch this. And we gave it everything we had to try and stop this thing from getting as big as it did.
The fire kept spreading. The Smiths learned that the first anchor point that the Forest Service would try to defend and prevent the fire from moving farther south was on Diamond Creek. That was tough to hear.
The issue we had with that point was there was 60,000 acres of prime grazing between where it was at that time and where he said that anchor point was. We took that meeting as they were willing to make us sacrificial lambs to defend that anchor point.
But we had to pick a place to take a stand. And Diamond Creek was where we took that stand. By doing that, that bought us time. That bought us weeks of time.
Forest officials wanted to prevent the fire from burning south toward the town of Salmon and the Salmon City watershed. The Diamond Creek anchor point was key in protecting those areas. Forest officials also were trying to keep the busy Salmon River Road open to outfitters and private float parties. The road is the primary access for launching main Salmon River float trips and finishing Middle Fork Salmon River float trips. Both rivers are national destinations. 7 float parties were coming off the Middle Fork every day. 8 float parties were hoping to launch on the main salmon every day. That turned out to be a big logistical issue for 2 months.
That was another logistical challenge for us, was to try to keep the rivers open for the river traffic. And so what we had to do is we, again, working with the incident management teams, we had to be able to, as best we could, predict what we thought the fire was going to do, to be able to marshal traffic at certain times of the day, to be able to get those folks either off the river or onto the river.
And then the Moose Fire burned to the west toward Panther Creek.
Once the fire, especially to the south, came out of the Salmon River breaks, it ran almost 10 miles up and over the top to the south and up into the lower part of the Moose Creek drainage and towards Napius Creek, which presents a whole nother level of complexity, because now you've got the Bear Track mine site, you've got the power lines to not only Bear Track but also to the currently operating Idaho Cobalt project, and also the Blackbird mine site.
Every day, the Smiths rode up into the forest below the fire line to gather cattle.
I went out every day and brought 1 cow home, 5 cows home, whatever I could find.
From the middle of July till the middle of August, we probably gathered more than 50% of the cattle in about a month. So it was, some days were bigger than others, but we worked at it daily, every day for a month. It was our main project, was to find as many cattle as we could and get them out of harm's way.
Many of the cattle they had pushed up the mountain onto Summer Range decided to retreat to the valley. That was a blessing in disguise.
I had the worst year ever that I've ever had trying to get cows to go over the top of the mountain. They just fought me tooth and nail.
The Smiths had made a quick decision to find safe harbor for their cattle in the valley below. They had purchased some new deeded ground where they could pasture animals near Carmen Creek.
We had friends in Leadore reach out to us this summer and took 100 head to their range.
On the night of September 7th, the Moose Fire took off once again.
We got downdrafts out of those thunderstorm cells, probably anywhere from 40 to, my estimate, probably 50 miles an hour. Blew the fire east, blew it right over the top of the ridge. And so it ran 17,000 acres and probably 7 miles that night and came over the top. That was the biggest run.
The fire blew over the top of a big fire break intended to protect the Salmon City watershed, and it burned a portion of the watershed.
Easily jumped the fuel break. It spotted over the fuel break, and that's, that we knew that.
After the big run, the fire began to lose intensity with shorter days and cooler nights. In early October, the Smiths received permission to go look for their cattle.
As you can see by looking at the background behind us, there was not such thing as a road or a trail that didn't have a downed tree or 400 across it. And so it took a lot of work to even get to where we could look for cattle.
They were overjoyed to see their family cabin had survived the blaze.
It made you feel really hopeful.
For Chyenne, it was tough to see the fire's devastation.
Just a roller coaster, and from not so bad to just horrendous.
By the end of October, a snowstorm snuffed out the Moose Fire. Luckily, the Smiths were able to retrieve all of their cattle.
We found every cow, so we got the cows home.
The Farm Service Agency has a program for loss of grazing range due to catastrophic natural events such as wildfire. The Smiths had to bring a lot of cattle home early, so the FSA reimbursement plan will help with that. A bigger concern now is how the wildfire will affect the Smiths' access to the diamond moose grazing allotment in the next 2 years. The Forest Service often closes grazing allotments for 2 years following a wildfire to allow plants to grow back.
We're obviously standing in a pretty devastated spot. I don't anticipate any cattle grazing right here next year. You know, this got burnt hot. There are lots of places on this mountain that did not get burnt at all or got burnt lightly. That would be excellent cattle habitat next year and in the future. We are going to work on a plan, a management plan, to try to graze the areas that are grazable and try to avoid these devastating areas that need time to heal.
I think it's going to be sooner, you know, based on what I've seen, I think it's going to be sooner than we think that we'll be able to allow the permittees back in there. I mean, it's all, you know, it's based on how well the grass regenerates, but a lot of it was light burning. You know, even the places where, you know, we used the drone to be able to burn out ahead of the fire front. The grass, you know, of course you got a forester here talking. I'm not a rangeland management specialist, but I've certainly got a lot of experience in regards to fire. You know, the grass should come back like gangbusters. It should be robust.
In the meantime, a burned area emergency response team visited the Moose Fire and recommended post-fire erosion control and rehabilitation measures to be implemented this spring. In the future, both the Smiths and the Forest Service would like to be more proactive about reducing dead and dying fuels in the forest.
I understand prescribed burning. I understand the need to get into areas that aren't worth other things, but it should be one tool in the toolbox, not the only tool. I see logging come back. I'd like to see these trees not just stand there and die. There's a lot that could be done. And grazing is one of those things, logging is one of those things, burning can be one of those things, but I think that we need to have bigger conversations about better ways to take care of our natural resources.
Salmon-Challis National Forest officials agree. They advocate for using all the tools available to improve forest management and health: logging, firewood, post and poles, livestock grazing, and prescribed burning. Another wildfire could occur anytime, and we need to be ready, Mark says.
This whole country is involved with fire, and so to me it's a matter of, you know, trying to anticipate and be as prepared as best we can, because we know we're going to get fire. It's not an if, it's when.